Hey everyone, and welcome. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for this definitive exam prep explainer titled NCP-MCI 7.5 14.2 Capacity Runway and Capacity Planning. We're going to set a nice steady pace today, because honestly, this topic isn't just about passing a certification test. It's really about mastering the tools that will keep your data centers running smoothly day in and day out. So grab your notes, get comfortable, and let's get ready to decode exactly how Prism Central predicts the future of your infrastructure.
Here's our game plan for today. 1. Why capacity planning matters. 2. Navigating the runway views. 3. Scenario analysis in action. 4. Common exam traps. And 5. Key facts to memorize. It's a structured masterclass focused purely on your exam success, so let's dive right in.
Starting with Section 1, Why Capacity Planning Matters. Before we start memorizing where to click, we really need to understand the philosophy behind this tool, right? Historically, a lot of IT management has been, well, entirely reactive. You know the drill. A server runs out of space, the red alarms start flashing, and suddenly everyone is scrambling to fix it. But with Prism Central, we are leaning heavily on its built-in machine learning capabilities. It's analyzing your resource usage over time, which lets you move completely away from that reactive firefighting mode and shift into proactive infrastructure management. Capacity planning isn't just some shiny dashboard feature, it is a vital operational safeguard. It literally prevents unexpected resource exhaustion before it ever has a chance to impact your users.
So to really get this, we have to understand exactly what we mean when we say runway. The exam is absolutely going to test your precise understanding of this term. Runway is officially defined as the estimated time interval that your current CPU, meaning central processing unit, memory, or storage capacity, is sufficient for your workload. And here is the kicker, so pay attention. This is based strictly on the current consumption model. Basically, it answers the question, if absolutely nothing changes about how we're growing right now, exactly how many days do I have until I hit a brick wall?
Moving right along to Section 2, Navigating the Runway Views.
Now that we know the why, let's talk about the technical how. The NCP-MCI exam loves to test your knowledge of the interface, so you should treat this click path as highly testable trivia. To find your predictive data, you start by logging directly into Prism Central. Next, from that application switcher, you select Intelligent Operations. After that, you navigate over to Planning from the navigation bar. And finally, you click the Capacity Runway tab. That exact sequence takes you right to the summary view of all your registered clusters and their specific resource runway info. Definitely memorize this path.
Once you actually get there, you'll see a few different widgets. The Cluster Runway widget breaks down your estimates by the three main resource pillars: storage, CPU, and memory. It's fantastic because it gives you the exact time remaining before each specific resource reaches its absolute maximum capacity.
But here's where it gets really interesting. How Nutanix calculates the overall cluster runway. Imagine your storage runway is looking pretty critical, sitting at just 14 days, but your CPU and memory, they're totally fine at 45 days. So what is your overall cluster runway? It's 14 days. I like to call this the lowest denominator rule. The overall cluster runway value is always strictly tied to the single most constrained resource. The system is smart enough to recognize that if you run out of storage in 14 days, it doesn't matter how much extra CPU you have lying around. Your cluster is still going to experience a severe capacity event.
All right, Section 3, Scenario Analysis in Action.
Knowing your current trajectory is awesome, but what if your boss walks in and says a massive new project is launching next quarter? That's exactly where scenario analysis comes in. Let's look at a concrete example. Imagine your current capacity is perfectly fine. It shows up as a comfortable, safe blue timeline. But then you hop into the Scenarios tab to model a future event, let's say adding 100 VDI, or virtual desktop infrastructure users. Now, each of those users requires a new VM, a virtual machine. You tell the system this massive workload will kick off in exactly 2 months. Almost instantly, Prism Central recalculates the whole thing. It color codes your projected bottlenecks. Your CPU might stay blue, meaning it can handle those new VMs without breaking a sweat. But your memory and storage timelines, they might suddenly flash red right at that 2-month mark. This is huge because it allows you to visually pinpoint exactly when you need to purchase and rack new nodes long before those new employees even show up for their first day.
Which brings us to Section 4, Common Exam Traps.
I need you to lean in closely for this next part, because we're going to cover the tricky edge cases and boundary limitations. The certification exam absolutely loves to test these to separate the novices from the true experts. If you look at the Capacity Configurations menu, you'll see that by default, Prism Central assumes all the storage, CPU, and memory capacity in the cluster should be considered when it estimates your runway. But let's be real. In the actual world, you never want to run at 100% capacity because, well, hardware fails. Thankfully, you can manipulate these default estimations using the reserve capacity for failure settings.
The exam is very likely going to ask you to distinguish between the two primary settings here, Auto Detect and None. If you select None, the system just ignores failure scenarios entirely. Absolutely no capacity is reserved. But if you select Auto Detect, the system brilliantly accounts for a node failure. Specifically, it computes your runway with enough cushion to account for the loss of the single largest node in your cluster. This basically provides an N+1 failure reserve. Knowing the distinct difference between these two toggles is highly testable, so keep it in mind.
And here is a massive exception that you absolutely must commit to memory. Standard Nutanix clusters support the full suite of storage, CPU, and memory runway features. We know that. However, if you see a scenario on the test involving a vCenter cluster or a Nutanix Cloud Infrastructure Compute Cluster, often abbreviated as NCIC, that is mapped to external storage, you have to remember this rule. The cluster storage runway feature is disabled. It is simply not available. If the exam asks about storage runway for a vCenter cluster from Prism Central 2023.3 onwards, the answer is just that it's not supported. Period.
This also perfectly illustrates another fundamental rule. The runway is strictly the number of days the existing capacity can handle the workload based on the current workload consumption model. Unless you are actively building a what-if scenario like we did with those VDI users earlier, the default runway widget is completely blind to your future business plans. It only knows what is happening right now, today. So don't let a trick question convince you that the default view somehow automatically anticipates your future manual deployments. It doesn't.
Finally, Section 5, Key Facts to Memorize.
We are in the home stretch. Get ready for a rapid-fire summary of the most critical numbers you need to pass Objective 14.2. These are the underlying metrics that power the whole machine learning algorithm. 21. This is the magic number. The Prism Central machine learning algorithm requires a strict minimum of 21 days of data from a cluster before any baseline runway estimates can even appear. Think about it. If you register a brand new cluster on a Monday, you cannot do capacity planning on Tuesday. You have to wait 21 full days for the system to learn your environment's normal, day-to-day behavior.
The interface actually has administrative notes explicitly stating that a graph or baseline band might not appear if less than 21 days of data is available. You really need to lock that requirement in for your exam. Also, just as a quick side note, it takes a full day after initially registering a cluster for any data to even begin appearing in Prism Central to start that 21-day clock.
Take a mental screenshot of these facts right now. These are your 4 pillars for the exam. Let's recap them one by one. First, that 21-day minimum data baseline we just talked about. Second, the system specifically checks the past 90 days of data to look for monthly seasonality, things like massive end-of-month payroll processing spikes. Third, it uses up to 365 days of past data, an entire year, for calculating and adjusting the baseline for annual seasonality. And fourth, our lowest denominator rule, where the overall runway always equals your lowest resource metric.
Let's wrap up this explainer by putting all of this together with a mock exam question. Imagine a cluster has 60 days of CPU runway, 30 days of memory runway, and it is mapped to a vCenter external storage solution. So what is the overall cluster runway? I want you to really think about the lowest denominator rule here, and then think about that vCenter storage trap we discussed earlier. How do those two rules interact in this specific scenario? I'm going to let you synthesize that one yourself, but honestly, if you've been following along, you know exactly how to handle it. Thank you so much for joining me to master Nutanix capacity planning. Keep up the great studying and good luck on your NCP-MCI 7.5 certification.